Greetings comic lovers and welcome back to Casually Comics, the channel where we chat all things comics, from reviews of comics new and old to history to anecdotes, really wherever our whims take us. In comics, there are certain decisions that have ripple effects. They trickle down for years and can manifest in bizarre ways, some that you are not expecting in the slightest. There are also decisions and moments that linger in the minds of fans and creators. They just stay there. The tale of what happened to Wally West. Why is he so beloved? Why does he have such staunch supporters in certain arenas? Understanding the tale of Wally West can be helpful when it comes to understanding the reception of Future State Flash. Future State Flash is actually a great opening to a conversation of something if you're newer to comic fandom you'll probably have heard floating around, and it may perplex you and you may not know how to approach it. And that's the statement, DC hates Wally West. You may even have seen a hashtag justice for Wally at points. So what's going on? Well, it's a long tale, so we're going to use Future State Flash as a springboard to talk about the history of Wally West and his treatment in the DC universe, and also touch on some other flashes along the way. As always with my reviews, spoilers. No plot left unturned. Nothing is safe. It's going to be an intense one, so strap in. But before we get started, I'm Sasha, and if you're enjoying this content, you know what to do. Hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. Join us in this comic book journey. It's about to get passionate. Get ready. Let's start off with an overview of Future State Flash issue 1. This tale, as with all of Future State, comes out of the aftermath of Dark Knight's death metal as DC establishes the omniverse, a world wherein all realities exist or have happened. How and what that will mean in terms of implementation has yet to be seen. We gotta wait. It's happening at the time of this recording. Future State presents itself as a potential of unwritten worlds, amusing on tales that may not be. Our Flash outing is brought to us by writer Brandon Vietti, with art by Dale Eaglesham and colors by Mike Atea. The premise: Wally West is a villain, but more than a villain, a murderer. He's stolen the Speed Force, so the other speedsters now must move at average speed like plebs as they utilize an arsenal of weaponry, some modified that they have gathered from their fallen rogues. But this is not to do battle with Wally, but to follow their leader Barry Allen's quest to reform him. There's still some good in him. He can be saved. Throughout the issue, they are eventually able to modify the Thinker Clifford DeVoe's cap. We have an intro video on the Thinker, this shameless plug, card and link. Then they are able to contact Wally on the psychic plane, and they learn that he has been corrupted by famine, an evil facet of the Speed Force. Throughout this, we learn that Wally has killed Wallace West, the iteration in New 52 that was created to replace him, and he later kills Jay Garrick, the Golden Age Flash, via psychic attack because the mind makes it real. We also see Bart Allen, Impulse, killed on panel. This is during their mission to checkmate to get the thinking cap. Just fun all around. Fun for the whole family. Bring your kids. After seeing all of this, Barry decides that he was wrong. There is no hope for Wally, and he's gonna have to go and take him down, but he's gonna have to do it without his other Flash companions, Avery Ho and Max Mercury, because they were injured in the psychic battle. So he's gonna have to go it alone with his arsenal full of rogues weapons, or other Flashes that he could potentially find, because there are still more. Okay, first, the whole Wally meta thing. We're gonna examine that, then we're gonna examine the story with that in mind, then we're gonna put that in a box and examine it without it, or try to. And we'll of course refer back to it as needed. Just full teacher mode. Get out your Flash books to page 23. There is a large resistance to the idea of a villainous Wally West, and a lot of that has to do with both the execution and the rationale / circumstances that led up to it in the first place. Wally West for many is not only a fan favorite Flash, but for some, their iteration of the Flash. You'll even hear the phrase sometimes, "He's my Flash." For that to make sense, we need to go even further back, to the transfer of the mantle of the Flash from Barry Allen to Wally West. Barry Allen was the Silver Age Flash, and Wally West was his protege. Wally West first debuted in the Flash number 110 in 1959. He was Kid Flash, a result of the exact same accident that created Barry Allen's powers. He would start off extremely derivative, same origin, same costume, they would run around both wearing Flash outfits. He only gets his iconic outfit with that space for hair that is probably intensely gelled to withstand that velocity in an issue years later. This is issue 135 in 1963, and it's great. He gets blasted with a mysterious lightning that somehow alters his costume. At one point, he starts to try to explain it, like he's like, "Barry, I think I can explain what happened," and Barry's like, "Shh. It's just better now." You could have just made him a new one. You didn't have to have vaguely defined science. Despite his derivative start, Wally would really start to come into his own over the years. He would become one of the stronger and better characterized sidekicks. In fact, someone put him up there with the iconic original sidekick Robin, Dick Grayson. Over the years, Wally's role would grow. He would become a teen titan, and here he would really shine, and his personality would really coalesce. Loyal, dedicated, fun-loving. You got a real sense of who Wally was. On the flip side, his mentor Barry Allen was having some critiques and struggles. While he was iconic, some were floating around a term surrounding him, one that also floated around his Silver Age contemporary Hal Jordan, the Green Lantern, and that was boring. Some had the sense that Barry was a bit milquetoast, a bit generic. As a result, you saw his adventures getting more and more outlandish and his villains more and more creative, and there are just some off-the-wall Flash plots, which of course makes his comic very entertaining to read, but some feel that he was still generic. But the things that were interesting were surrounding him, but not him himself. Leading up into Crisis on Infinite Earths, which would see the death of Barry Allen, he had actually been sent to live in the future with Iris. This was after she had been resurrected because she had been killed by the Reverse Flash, quite brutally by the way. He stuck his vibrating hand through her head and then solidified it, because the Reverse Flash does not play. In fact, it's when the Reverse Flash is coming to kill Barry Allen's new fiancée, Fiona Webb, that it looks like Barry snaps his neck, but no, it was a ruse. Reverse Flash snapped his own neck, dedicated to villainy. Anyway, Iris didn't stay dead, and here's how. It had been established that Iris was actually born in the 30th century and then sent back as an infant and raised in the past. So because killing her would have created a time paradox, her consciousness was sent forward back to the 30th century and placed in a new body. And then Barry went forward and joined her there to live with her, and he retired. Screw the present, other heroes can deal with that. Someone else is gonna have to try the key in every door, Clark. But sending a character to retire in another time period is a clear indication that you're not exactly entirely sure what to do with them. So it is in Crisis on Infinite Earths, after only a few weeks of happiness with Iris while in comic book time, Barry is given a hero send-off. He is instrumental in stopping the antimatter. He destroys the antimatter cannon by creating a speed vortex, but the power is too much and he dies in the process. Dies because it would quickly be written that there were back doors, that he could come back somehow. Later it would be established as via the Speed Force, but the Speed Force was actually invented during Wally's era. There are a lot of things that come up in Flash lore during Wally's era, and they are then retroactively applied to Barry. The CW Flash show is notorious for this. For the time though, Wally West would assume the mantle of the Flash, and he would do so reluctantly. He would struggle with feelings of insecurity and wanting to live up to his mentor and uncle's legacy. He always approached the role with a great deal of respect, and so for many in the audience that created a bond, a sense that he was going through a transformation. He grew like Nightwing. You saw him go from Kid Flash to the Flash, and he did it with a gravitas. It felt like it mattered. It didn't have the same we need to grab the hip youth vibe that you sometimes got with Kyle Rayner when he replaced Hal Jordan later on in the 90s. And so Crisis would herald a new era and new Flash. Wally would get a solo series beginning in 1987, and his tenure as the main Flash would begin. He was even chosen to be the Flash in the animated universe, the juggernaut that was the DCAU, that is the DC animated universe, the universe that sprung off of Batman the Animated Series. And those cartoons were instrumental in introducing the characters to many people, and for some came to be how they knew them. Not everybody hopped back into comics, so for some it was the only way they knew them, leading to people who only knew of Wally West as the Flash and didn't even know about Barry Allen. Of course, in comics it was a different story, and there was still a contingent who wanted and thought of Barry Allen as the one true Flash. And over time, behind the scenes, that mindset would start to win out in the comic sphere. Now, there were some hiccups in Wally's tenure. He wasn't the Flash the entire time. There was a Bart Allen period where he was the Flash, and there were the inevitable "is Barry actually alive?" gasp plots. But for the most part, it was Wally. But Barry Allen would slowly start to reappear. He actually had a cool cameo in Quasar, yes, in the Marvel Universe, it was a thing, during the issue where they were racing to see who the fastest was. Because as the CW tells me, I believe that Barry Allen may be the fastest man alive. In DC, he would really start to make a return in Final Crisis under Grant Morrison, and would be fully resurrected in 2009 in Flash Rebirth under Jeff Johns. At this point, he would retake the mantle of the Flash, and a problem would be presented. What to do with Wally? He was too old to be Kid Flash now, and he had been the Flash for decades. He was a grown man with a family and kids of his own, kids who had also taken on hero identities, kids who were doomed to be erased from existence alongside their father. This tracks back to something we discussed in the Rick Grayson retrospective, shameless plug, card and link, and that is at DC, certain higher-ups, especially Dan Didio, had a problem with legacy characters, i.e. not liking them and feeling that they didn't serve a purpose and made pre-established heroes feel old. Basically that classic old rigidity about canon moving forward. How far can it actually go? An attachment to certain versions of characters is of course understandable, but in a situation like Barry Allen's resurrection, it creates a whole host of problems for the characters around them. Like a bad driver causing a car crash who then just gets to blissfully go on their way. That's Barry Allen. Wally was now displaced. Now it was awkward and he was just kind of floating there. And 2011, when DC rebooted the entire universe with Flashpoint and a new world was created, one that largely eradicated legacy, Wally West would be erased from existence. Just never existed, but instead a new Wally West would take his place. It's about to get interesting. Enter Wallace West, the biracial reimagining of Wally West. Now this was met with confusion. What? Why? Why get rid of Wally and replace him with a new Wally? There were clear attempts to broaden the diversity of the DC universe. Nothing new, it had been done before, but traditionally it was in a legacy sense, passing on mantles, and not with the erasure and rewriting of a character. But with legacy not being something that was being leaned into, this was the solution that was presented instead, a bending of a character. This decision caused a lot of fallout and did a disservice to a lot of people. It forced an environment where emotions ran high and assumptions were made. Assumptions of bigotry and racism if one did not wholeheartedly accept the new Wally. Confusion at the reaction and hostility from old fans by new ones who were the target to bring on board. Because if you were a new fan coming into this and didn't know anything about past Wally or didn't have that connection or history with him, this could look pretty intense. Without the history or context, it became a minefield of assumptions in some corners. So it was a disservice to old fans of Wally by tossing them aside, presenting a scenario where many had things assumed about their character. It was a disservice to new fans who now had a harder time getting involved in the pre-existing fandom potentially because of all this fallout, and most of all, it was a disservice to Wallace West himself, because Wallace himself was not a bad character and had the same affable likability that is one of the hallmark traits of Flash characters, and his stories were interesting. The further he got away from being a duplicate Wally, the stronger he got. He had a different start, one some admittedly found stereotypical, and a late one in New 52. He was introduced in 2014, so 2 years before Rebirth, another sticking point his fans had been asking about Wally and where he was for years at that point, only for Wallace West to arrive in his stead, and then this also gave new Wallace a short time to get established. Messy. But the whole reception could have been mitigated. While there would have been some resistance to change, as there always is, it could have been smoother. Wally had existed since 1959. He was at that point 52 years old. He had been Kid Flash for 26 years and the Flash for roughly 24, so there was an understandable attachment to the character from many corners. But it was stronger for the Flash version than the Kid Flash version because that was further back. In short, it probably would have received a better reception to present just a new version of Kid Flash rather than a new version of Wally West. Because this was all following off all of these changes from before and people feeling that Wally was being shoved aside and mistreated. This just felt like another entry in that story. While there were some who reacted negatively because of this new character's race, there are so many other factors going on here that could have fed into how this character was received. When someone sees an I like a character, I don't like a character, one can't really go deeper into the mind or psyche. We're not psychic, you can't assume, I mean you can, but you shouldn't. It didn't have to be like this. New Flash characters pop up all the time, and most end up being decently well received. It's a mythos that is primed for expansion, like the Bat family. There is a concept of a Flash family. Wallace would end up having a strong fan base too. The CW's Flash show would actually help this, but they started off with a universe wherein it was clear that Wally was never going to exist, which is very different than starting off with a Wally and then erasing him with a new Wally. Because these extended universe shows and the like, they're kind of viewed as a different universe anyway. It's just different environments and different atmospheres, different histories, different contexts. The whole thing could have just been smoother and been a better experience for old fans, for new fans, for Wallace, who didn't deserve to be saddled with all of that baggage. The handoff of Barry to Wally was just better than Barry back to Wally, because one was a passing of the torch and the other was a pushing aside, and in some people's eyes an invalidation of that character's time in the role. Kind of a thanks for keeping my seat warm for me, but daddy's home now. Why'd I say daddy? But then DC Rebirth was announced. The fact that they were going to bring back some of that pre-New 52 canon, and one of the big things that fans were excited about was the fact that Wally West was going to make his return. It was one of the big things of Rebirth. It was emotional, and he was going to bring some of that old canon back with him, and he did. And Wallace got to stay too, and the two even teamed up, and it was wholesome. But there was still a problem. The same problem as from before. What to do with Wally? He was still too old to be Kid Flash, and now there was also a Kid Flash in that space, and Barry Allen is still the Flash, so what to do with Wally? And the answer still was not there. But then it came in the form of his erased children, because Wally still remembered the past timeline. He still remembered a lot of things that other people didn't. And that was used when it came to the question of what to do with his character. A siren call was answered, one that is always there floating in the background when there is a character who is just kind of treading water, a hero that is. What can we do? How can we make him interesting? I know. What if we made him bad? Enter Heroes in Crisis by Tom King, a series with a premise by exploring mental health. Miles will vary hard in how well it does in that regard, as well as how it handles the characterizations that it's juggling. I don't even know what Will is. I'm fine. Everything's okay. We're all okay. Everything's fine. So the main plot of this is the solving of a murder mystery. Heroes and villains have been murdered at Sanctuary, a special neutral location where heroes and villains can get therapy. At first it seems that Wally was one of the victims. But no. Oh no, no, no. He snapped under the pressure. Those dueling realities got to him, and then he broke into the records and read about everybody else's trauma, and it overwhelmed him, and he lost control of the Speed Force. And so when people came to answer that alarm, he exploded and they died. And then to cover up, he went forward to the future and killed a future version of himself and brought it back and left it there to stage the scene, and also low-key framed Harley Quinn and Booster Gold, you know, like a hero. This was not well received. In fact, it was potentially worse received than him just being erased out of existence, because the sentiment was you brought him back, made a big deal about it, for this? Thanks? This event would later be retconned to him being influenced/manipulated by the Reverse Flash. It still happened, but now there was an added layer to it. At this point, it was really starting to sink in for people that there really wasn't a plan for Wally West. He just didn't seem to fit in with whatever the grand scheme or design of things was. All of this tracks back to the resurrection of Barry Allen. Every other character had to make way for Barry. It created the ripple effect, not only on Wally, but on other legacy characters based off of him and around him. Characters in limbo with no space to move forward. Although funnily enough, Wally West's next series would be called Flash Forward. It would involve him sitting in my favorite chair in the whole DC universe, Metron's chair, getting involved in fixing up the timeline. Fixing in quotes. Wibbly wobbly multiple Wallies. Which would be part of what leads us into Dark Knight's death metal, which of course has led us to the omniverse. Now the omniverse presents the reader with a scenario where everything happened. So there's a way to look at this as a good Wally is still out there and exists because everything exists, so rejoice. But there is another side to the sword's edge. There is the potential that the omniverse could be used as a weapon or tool to attempt to silence dissenting fan opinion. A kind of how can you not like this because everything happened, your version exists somewhere. Which side note is no consolation for poor plot or characterization or storytelling. It doesn't invalidate criticism at all. An opinion cannot and has never been silenced because of canon, so making all things canon technically won't stop that. There's always room for discussion when it comes to things like this, and people get passionate because there are so many sentiments and feelings attached to them. A lot of this tracks back to that inability of comics to move forward though, and I'm not sure if simply declaring there's no Prime Earth is a way to deal with that, or if it's just going to cause some to worry that their feelings are going to be invalidated and that people are going to try and shut down discussion. Also, the reason that Elseworlds work is because they have a main canon to bounce off of. How the omniverse works out is going to really depend on how they implement it. It remains to be seen at the time of this recording. Could be great, could be awful, could be meh. You see, I refuse to be silenced. I'm going to talk about what I want to talk about. Superman's girlfriend Lois Lane. I don't hate Barry Allen, but I do have a bit of an issue with the idea that everything else needs to move around him so that he can be the Flash no matter what it is. Does everybody get out the way, Barry Allen? I can accept new Flashes. I can accept Wally not being the Flash. There are going to be new characters and they're not all going to be the one that I like the best. But just, couldn't we be nicer to Wally? Couldn't he have more of a Nightwing thing? He can be a different character and just grow and be someone who isn't the main Flash. If Barry has to be the iconic Flash, it doesn't have to be so oof. So all of that baggage and potentially some stuff I didn't even mention is what some fans are coming into Future State Flash with, and that definitely colors how you read it, because certain events, when you have all of that history, they play out a little differently. Like Wally killing Wallace, is that some kind of commentary on what he did to the character? Is it not? I don't know. With all of the history swirling around, I'm not gonna lie, my mind went there for a minute. So in Future State, you have Barry pushing against all evidence and devastation that Wally is wreaking to save him. But narratively, you're asking why he's jeopardizing everything for one character. Now, if you take the history out of it, put it in a box and try and look at this, it's an okay comic, but it's very difficult to separate not just the Wally stuff, but the Flash history stuff, because the story relies heavily on you knowing who people are. All of the imagery of, say, the Rogue's weapons, or just dumping all those Flashes there and just expecting you to be able to recognize them. If you aren't familiar with Flash lore, it's not gonna play as well, and you're gonna have a lot of questions as to why you're supposed to care about Wally when he's just murdering people on panel. I don't wanna go there, I wanna go to happy places. But there are some potential positives. It's interesting and it does have stakes, and it certainly is action-packed, and it takes the time to really get introspective with Barry at least, and catch you up. You know enough to follow the plot, even if it is banking on past knowledge to get its emotional response out of you. Now, the idea of the Flash family trying to figure out how to still be crime fighters without their speed is interesting, and in a different setting could be very fun, which is one of the Flash's strengths. They play well in a fun setting. They can do dark and gritty, but it's not their forte, and before it was one of the things that set them apart, that they weren't as angsty as other heroes. Now, when Barry was resurrected, they hit the angst hard, having the Reverse Flash go back in time and murder his mom, which in all fairness was entirely in character for the Reverse Flash, who is terrifying. Really scary. But there's a reason that when the emotion light spectrum was in play, that Barry was selected to be a lantern of hope, because there's just something uplifting about the Flash in general. Or there usually is. It's not present in this story because this is very, very dark. Which, if you wanted a darker Flash tale, then this is something for you. This story does pivot very quickly though, from I'll do anything to, well, there's no hope, time to take take him down. I have more whiplash than Maxwell Lord. For an event touting worlds potentially unwritten, this doesn't feel all that fresh, and more like a retread of versions of characters and tone that some people potentially were hoping for less of. I was hoping for a bit less of it, but I am a big Wally fan admittedly though, so that does color how I view these things. Personally, I don't think that this is the strongest or most fun outing that Future State has to offer. I hope that was informative and interesting for those of you who may have been wondering why there has been such a salty reception to Future State Flash in certain corners. But I want to hear what you think. Let's start off with the easy question. What do you think about Future State Flash? Do you enjoy Wally as a villain? Do you think that people aren't giving it enough of a chance? Are you just invested and ready for more Flash? What do you think about Barry Allen as the Flash? His resurrection? What do you think about Wally West? Do you not like the fact that it seems like the two are being pitted against each other in a way? What would you do to fix all of this mess, or do you feel that the omniverse does fix that, or that there's nothing to fix? Are you here for justice for Wally? Just share all of your thoughts down below, and while you're down there, please do all the YouTube things like share, comment, subscribe, and hit the bell notification so that you never miss a vid. Thanks so much for taking some time out of your day to spend it discussing comics with me. I always appreciate it, and I will see you again soon. I was only intending to do a Future State roundup after the Yara Floor one, then I just had too much to say. I'm trying to be efficient, but it just doesn't happen. I'll see you again soon. Bye-bye.